Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
Welcome aboard, everyone, to another episode of Democracy Exchange with The Depot, the one-stop station where we engage in conversations to foster understanding. Today, The Depot is sitting down with Ohio's Attorney General, Dave Yost. We are so excited to have you here at BGSU. Thank you so much for your time.
Good to be with you.
For our listeners, Mr. Yost has spent his career in public service throughout Ohio. He served as a county auditor and prosecutor in the county of Delaware, Ohio, and has also served as Ohio's state auditor. Mr. Yost, to start off our podcast, would you please tell us what motivated you to run for Attorney General? Were there any important political figures that inspired or led you to pursue that path?
So I worked for a little while as the communications director for the mayor of Columbus, Buck Reinhardt. He was the one that inspired me to go to law school and was a mentor throughout my career. He ran for state treasurer in 1982, which was a terrible year for Republicans. We got wiped out across the country, really, because of the recession that year. Ronald Reagan was president. It was the first Reagan midterm. But he always aspired to statewide office and never did get there. But he was an inspiration to me. The reason I ran is the same reason I became a newspaper reporter back in the day before my public service career. The same reason I went to law school, the same reason I became a prosecuting attorney. I see disorder and injustice in the world, and it makes my bones burn. And this was an opportunity to stand for the rule of law, which just means the same rules for everybody, whether you're rich or poor, politically powerful or completely unconnected, whether you're new to this country, you've been here 7 generations, same rules for everybody.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Alongside Attorney General Lee Fisher, you were both invited to attend our leadership luncheon here at BGSU to encourage conversation and civil engagement. From your perspective, why are civil discussions important?
Well, I think in this environment, we really need to start by asking, what is a civil discussion? Because a lot of people use civil as a synonym for nice or polite. And I don't think a civil discussion starts from a premise that it has to be nice and polite. I think that it needs to be measured. But let's ask ourselves, what does it mean to be civil? And so I think it starts with the recognition that the person you're talking with is a human being entitled to the same respect and dignity of every other human being. I draw from the wellspring of my faith, which says that we are all created in the image of God. But whether you take that dignity, that equality before the law, as a originating from faith, or whether you simply take a Jeffersonian deist approach that is maybe less specific, it has to start there. Because if we don't have that respect for each other, then any discussion, indeed our ability to even live together, completely falls apart. And in our moment in time, we have people on the left that are saying people like I are fascists, that our views, that our opinions are so objectionable, so hateful, that we're not entitled to respect. We're not entitled to a place in the public square. And conversely, there are people on my side of the aisle, regrettably, who say that, there are progressives that want to destroy our country, destroy what America stands for. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a Republican for a reason, and I think that there are progressive ideas that are destructive. That doesn't mean that the people that hold those views are somehow less or not patriots or don't love America. So I think when we're talking about civil discourse, we have to start from the position that it may get heated. It may not be comfortable. That's not what civil discourse means. Civil discourse means I'm not going to attack you for who you are. I am going to oppose your ideas. It starts from the idea that we are of equal worth and value before the law, equal dignity as humans, and that whatever our differences, they are less than those commonalities. But don't mistake civility for merely being quiet or well-mannered, because I don't think civil discourse requires that. And if it does, I think the American experiment has not been terribly civil.
Yeah. And you probably bring that attitude all the time to your courtrooms and to all of your cases that you've ever prosecuted or defended.
The courtroom's a great analogy. I fight like hell in court. I don't go to court these days. I supervise an office of 400 lawyers who go to court. But when I was prosecuting attorney and still going to court, I fought like hell in court. Now, that doesn't mean that the defense lawyer who was defending a criminal didn't deserve to be there, or that they were not serving a valuable function. In fact, they were serving an indispensable function for democracy. They're restraining the government because the government has the power to throw you in jail, to take your money, in certain circumstances, to even take your life. That's a big deal. And we restrain the government from doing that and require in a criminal case that they prove their case by proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, how do we do that? The defense lawyer goes in and fights like hell against you. And so you can have that battle in front of the jury, still restrain your passions, but try hard to prove that your side is right and the other side is wrong. And that's a great simile, a metaphor for the larger political debates that we're in. Mm-hmm. Civility does not require me to have an open mind that, for example, that sex is a mutable fluid concept. I don't believe that. I believe that it's a biological fact. I understand that there are people that disagree with that, and I'm very willing to debate the issue and have debated the issue in court and in legal briefs. That doesn't mean that that other person is evil because of the ideas that they hold. And I think that's what we're missing. But it doesn't require us to be open-minded. When we have a debate, the person that I'm debating is trying just as hard as I am to convince our audience that we have the better side of the argument.
Are there ever times where you believe open minds are crucial or necessary to those debates?
Actually, I would start with a precursor to open minds, which is humility.
Yeah.
So if we have humility, and I would say that that is the indispensable virtue for a government official, we start from a position that I don't know everything. Now, the degree of open-mindedness that I have should be commensurate with what I know. So if I am bringing a criminal case into court, I know a great deal. We've had an investigation. I have lived with this case for a long time. I've prepared it. I know it backwards and forwards. I know who did what, who said what, and I have my theory as to why. I don't have a very open mind when I go to court in front of a jury. There might be a surprise, a Perry Mason moment where the case suddenly changes. Did you ever see the movie My Cousin Vinny?
I have not.
You got to watch it.
Okay.
Because the trial changes the prosecutor's mind about his case, and he should have. But that's the exception, not the rule. On the other hand, when I come in and I don't know much about anything on a subject, I should have an open mind because I haven't learned anything yet. I have no experience in it.
Very true.
And there's a continuum between the prosecutor who's ready to go to a jury and knows his case versus the public official or the citizen who's encountering something for the first time and doesn't really know very much. I don't know much about Slavic culture. For me to have many opinions about the Balkans would be foolhardy. Um, on the other hand, there are moments where uh, two people who all have some opinions can listen to each other and become better informed and change. And that should be our day-to-day conversations with our fellow citizens.
That actually ties really well into one of the questions I have regarding the public. You are in a role of public service. You're the person who understands what's going on in the components of today's government and crime and current events. But for the average citizen in this representative democracy, you being the representative, them just trying to learn about our current events in the world. Um, my question is, my generation has grown up in a time of rapid technological development and media development. I personally didn't experience the time before the internet and social media were interconnected with everyday life, which it is. And a lot of people are impacted every day by those changes in our media and our platforms that we see on our phones. With social media platforms changing how people interact with current events, how has criminal and legal enforcement had to evolve to keep up with the ever-changing world we find ourselves in when everyone's influenced by all of these different perceptions and nobody really has a common one solid source to rely on?
Yeah, I think we've always had that issue to deal with. If you go back in time, there used to be 4 or 5 newspapers in large cities, and there would be a Republican newspaper and a business newspaper and a Democrat newspaper and maybe a labor newspaper, depending on the town. And they all they had different takes on what was important about the news, what news was important, and they had multiple different sources. What social media did was it democratized that. You used to have some money to buy a newspaper and have reporters and be able to produce that and distribute it. Social media and the internet have made it almost cost-free. The ability to do a podcast or to write a Substack or to, gain followers on Instagram or X makes it possible that the guy that used to sit down at the corner of the bar and drink his beer and spout off to 3 or 4 people that were in the bar now gets to have several thousand followers and do it, in front of everybody. I think that this is just a new kind. Here's the big change, though, that I think that has happened that presents a clear and present danger. I don't think it's a law enforcement challenge as much as it's a regulatory challenge. And that is the amplification that social media brings to our political discourse. Whereas it used to take a little bit of time, several news cycles for everybody to kind of know that something happened most of the time. And the ideas about what it meant took some more time. And it might be a week before there kind of is a solidified sense of things. Now it happens right now. Mm-hmm. And it happens because social media has this positive feedback system. Now, in engineering, positive feedback amplifies, but it also destabilizes a system and creates noise and distortion. Negative feedback is used to control a system and create stability. Think about if you've ever heard a squealing. Have you ever heard a squealing microphone? When there's a PA system.
Yeah.
Oh, it's horrible,
It
right?
is.
That's positive feedback. What's happening is the speakers are so loud that as I'm speaking into the microphone, it's going into the PA. The PA is reproducing it and feeding it back into the mic. That's why we call it feedback. And then it goes through the amplification again, and it's doing this in an infinite loop. And we get that horrible screeching sound. Mm-hmm. That's what social media does. It's positive feedback. So one of the things that I think we could and should do is create a breaker or a break that turns down that volume. Everybody has talked in the last 4 or 5 years about moderating content. But the problem with that is we're giving somebody the power to say, well, that's hate speech, we're going to take that down. Or that's objectionable, or that's beyond the pale, whatever it is. And we all are fallible humans with our own prejudices. That's a terrible idea, to give somebody else the authority to say what we can say and what we can't. But what if instead the social media platforms controlled the speed at which it disseminated? So instead of happening within the next 20 minutes and suddenly there's 2 million impressions, what if that took 24 hours or even 2 days to get to the 2 million? Then people have the opportunity to respond to it, to bring other facts, other viewpoints, to debunk things. And I think it changes the toxic nature of social media.
I have a similar follow-up, but it relates to another question I have. When we are talking about everyday people, they're consuming media, they're consuming information, they want to know the answers. In one of my classes, I study public policy and how voters' behavior and voter perception of those public policies and how they are forming their opinions. And what we really get to the heart of is that people just want to know. They just want to know the facts and they want to know the truth. It's all about, what is my truth? When it comes to that, in our polarized landscape that everybody has started to form into, because we all want to know what our truth is. And it has formed into, what does our party say our truth is? What does our identity say our truth is? When you are in a position where you are representing the state and you're looking at the state from a top-down point of view, and you are in charge of a bunch of attorney generals, and you're in charge of lawyers, and not attorney generals, you're an attorney general, in charge of lawyers, who all have cases that represent people. How does your office have to interact with the public opinion and the public behavior of what your outcomes of your office do? I'm kind of going off my script a little bit, but are there any important influences that will change or affect your stances and decision-making in your role?
That's a great question, because as Attorney General, I'm supposed to be following the Constitution and the law, which is objective. The influences, I think, come from what the people think is important. So when I'm hearing a lot of interest about a particular subject, I'm going to pay attention to that personally. We may direct more resources in that direction. We may be looking at, is there a solution that we can bring or advocate for that goes beyond the simple function of the office? But let's pivot to something else you said that I think is really important. And it's become vernacular. I mean, it's common for people to talk about, quote unquote, my truth. What they really mean by that, and I think it's important to think this through, is they're talking about the things that resonate with me in the life that I lead and the experience I have, and it's different than yours. And I think that's valuable, and it's something not only to be accepted, but to be respected. But that doesn't make it true. It means that that's your lived experience. The truth is something that we all have to agree on is the same for all of us. Truth is not the same as validity. So your feelings are valid, but they're not shared by anybody else. They can't be replicated. Truth can be replicated. Truth is gravity. If I drop that bottle of water over there on the floor, it's going to hit the floor. It's the same for all of us. Now, you're a female. I'm male. I don't know what it's like to be a female in the world. I can read about it. I can listen to people tell me what it's like, but I can't share that. Does that mean that your experience is not true? No, but that's not really what truth is. Your experience is valid and needs to be respected. But what is true should be the things that we all agree are the same and that are going to be experienced the same way. I think by borrowing the idea of truth to mean what is valid and what our lives and what our experience are and what means is important to us, I think we further muddle our ability to have civil discourse.
How does your office balance the tensions of our high political landscape while staying true to the Constitution and the facts of cases to find that truth amongst your work and the work of your lawyers?
Great question. And I hate to keep sounding like a lawyer and saying, well, what do we mean by that word? But it's important because politics means a lot of things, and most people use it very loosely. So there's politics of the Republican and Democrat, the partisan politics. And I would hope that I don't take official actions of the office based on Republican or Democrat labels. But there's also politics in the sense of the struggle for the acquisition and maintenance of power. I also hope that that would not drive me. And when people talk about politics, those two things are things that they disdain. And I think properly so to a degree. Another thing that politics can mean is our ideas about how the world is put together and how people interact and what is important. Is individual responsibility more important or collective action? That kind of politics should enter into a public officer's decision making because it's full of meaning. And in that kind of context, I suppose there are moments when politics informs the decision about how the law applies to a particular set of facts.
I do have a question I want to get to you, and it is, how does your office work with other state agencies or local governments to tackle issues like opioid addiction, child abuse, homelessness, those really systemic issues that go very deep into society? You're the Attorney General can't handle all of that alone. Your team of lawyers cannot handle that alone. So I'm sure you work with other agencies, governments throughout Ohio to work together to tackle those issues.
And we do work with state and local governments. At the state level, most of those people, my client the Attorney General, the lawyer for the state, is the people of the state. But the people of the state hired a CEO called the governor. They hired a bunch of people to run the business of their government. And I represent them in court. At the state level, there are some things that are given to the Attorney General to decide, and many, many more things are given to the state agencies under the governor. The governor and the legislature are the primary policy actors in state government. Work with local governments. For example, we gave money from the opiate settlement. We sued the opiate distributors and makers and brought, over $1 billion back to the state. Some of that money was ours to use to fight the opiate epidemic. And So we worked with county sheriffs, for example, to contract for addiction treatment in the county jails. You get an addict who steals something or gets in a fight, they're going to go to jail because of the crime that they committed. They're not going to get any drugs in jail, so they're going to get addiction sick, which is horribly inhumane and difficult. And they're still addicts. So if we want them, when they get out of jail, which they're eventually going to do, to be successful citizens and hopefully not be addicted anymore and hopefully not commit any more crimes, we have to help them overcome their addiction. So we directed that money, for example, to county sheriffs so they can buy medicine to deal with the addiction sickness, the withdrawal, as well as provide mental health and addiction services to help them in those first stages as they dry out on the road to recovering from their addiction. There are hundreds of things like that we do, kind of fly below the radar, but it's important to work together in those operational senses to address the many challenges we have.
How do you listen to constituents from your role? Constituents are working, living their life in their cities. How do you stay in touch with them, listen to them, kind of like how you did when you were in public service before this role? Now you're up in the head role. How do you still fight for the Ohioans and make sure they are protected, make sure that their rights are secured, making sure you're fighting for what they need?
So, first of all, I'm out in public. We're going to be at a lunch here on campus shortly. I'm going to get there a half hour early, and I am going to spend time talking to faculty and students, and they're going to tell me what they think.
Yes.
And people recognize me in the grocery store, at the dry cleaners, and stop me and tell me what they think or about the problems that they're facing. We also have a consumer affairs section, which we've got a call center with about, I think, 13 or 14 people who take calls all day long. And that data, some of it's, can you help me with this? And it's a one-off, and we do that. Other times we are hearing from the constituents about something that they're upset about or something that they see developing. And that information comes back to my staff and ultimately to me. So I listen a lot. I also watch the news media because, that's a channel for the people to be able to talk to me as well.
Awesome. We are starting to wrap up our podcast. And to finish up, I have one last question, and it is for all of those prospective students like me who are preparing for careers in public service. Maybe we want to be lawyers. Maybe we're criminal justice majors and we want to go and be the sheriffs and officers or the lawyers of the next generation. What advice would you have for us? What would you say to us if you could talk directly to those criminal justice majors, those political science majors, your forensic science majors, anything like that?
I would tell you something that you won't understand for a little while until you have a job. Authority and power are never given to you as a reward or as something you earned or a recognition of a job well done. It's always given to you for the people over whom you have authority. It is not a prerequisite, a perquisite of office. That's where we get the word perk, the perks of the office. They the perquisites, the things that go with it. Your authority is given to you to serve. It is given for the benefit of the people over whom you exercise the authority. I think that across all of our institutions, we have lost track of the fact that authority should limit your options, not expand them. There's a great book came out a few years ago, late teens, by a guy named Yuval Levin. He's a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, called A Time to Build. And he spends a pretty good amount of time looking at the unremarkable fact that our institutions in America have lost credibility and are becoming ineffective. They're deteriorating.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the fascinating ideas that he introduced there is that our institutions have become platforms for leaders. So whereas for most of history, an institution would limit what you could do, let's say you're the CEO of a hospital. Even if you like cigars and you enjoy a cigar and a bourbon, like I've been known to do on a Friday night after a long week, if you're running a healthcare system with all of the attendant problems that habitual tobacco use creates, you're going to not smoke those cigars in public because you are focused on the mission of that institution. That's a small example. But there's 1,000 ways in which a leader loses the ability to do whatever it is they want to do and have duties because of the institution they serve. But today, social media and the way we approach promoting our brands has led to a point where the leaders treat the institutions as subservient to them, no longer limiting them, but increasing and amplifying their power.
Yeah.
That, Yuval Levin argues, I think correctly, is degrading the effectiveness of those institutions. And so to those who aspire to public office or to public service, whether that's appointed or elected or simply leading, maybe you're going to lead a business or an institution, a corporation, I would encourage you to remember that the authority that's given to you is for a purpose, and it is unrelated to you or your ambition.
I can see how that would be relatable. As a student, just entered my 20s, I can tell from my generation that there has been a lack of trust among our leaders because we've grown up in a world that's so polarized and everyone is so at each other's throat that people are scared about the future of our democracy. And I really like that advice. And I hope my generation can be better. Sorry, this is offensive. Be better than generations before us. And when we are leaders, I really hope that we do take the authority that we are given and we remember to do public good. Or BGSU, that's our model, a public university for a public good. And I really wish that more politicians would take that model into their heart. And I have hope for our generation that we will. So thank you for those words. Thank you for being on this podcast and for your time.
It's been a pleasure.
I'm really grateful I got to interview you today. As we finish up this podcast, I'd also like to thank our production team and the Depot. So our production team, Bryn Drybeck, Julia Amlin, and Thomas Williamson. And special thanks to the Falcon Radio and for our professor, Robert Alexander, who is the founder of our Depot. It's been a pleasure to be your host and researcher, along with my colleague, Connor Hand. Please make sure to join us next time for the Democracy Exchange with the Depot. Bye-bye for now. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope all of you enjoyed it. And yesterday was Election Day, so I hope that you are all able to go out and vote and make a difference in this democracy. If you're interested in finding the video version of this podcast, you can find us on our YouTube page at BGSU Depot. If you'd like to keep up with what we're doing, make sure to follow our Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at BGSU_Depot. Thank you so much, and tune in next time.